Dear MGTOWs, I'm not your homo. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and it's come to the point in my YouTube career that I decided I need to clarify my stance about men going their own way, or MGTOWs, because I am a gay men's rights advocate, and it's come up a few times at this point. Before I go into detail about my feelings on MGTOWs, I want to make it clear that I don't have a problem with everybody who takes on this label. Optimus Christ, for example, has been in numerous live streams that I've been in, and he's a super nice guy. And when I've talked to him about his version of being a MGTOW, it really seems relatively innocuous and basically seems like he's just a dude who wants to focus on himself at the moment, which is fine. I'm doing that myself right now. I've also talked to Angry MGTOW a few times, and he was always nice, though I can't say I have actually really gotten into watching his videos. And I think that's a good way to segue into the point of this video of mine. You see, as a gay MRA, it is admittedly hard to care much about men who base their identity around separating themselves from women. Not because I do that naturally, but because I don't. I have no problem with females as a whole, no more so than I have a problem with men as a whole. I'm kind of a critical bastard. However, I have had at least 2 or 3 MGTOWs try to seemingly cozy up to me and get me to start getting into their philosophies. And that's where I have to draw the line. Dudes, I really don't care if you want to personally stay away from women, and in many cases I can even understand why you would be doing this. But do we need an identitarian and often anti-woman philosophy based around it? Truthfully, although I'm sure this has been said a million times, I'll say it again. The more radical MGTOWs that have an entire worldview set up around imagining a future without women, or what fucking ever you guys are actually thinking of, are exactly what inspires people to assume that men's rights advocates are just a mirror image of feminism. Even though there's so many good MRA speakers that sound nothing like the reverse of feminists, and almost zero decent prominent feminist speakers. Almost every single famous feminist that isn't Christina Hoff Sommers or Camille Paglia is basically a cultist. They act like they're in a cult, they hate men, they're ridiculous, and they lie. Most famous MRA speakers are nothing like this. MGTOWs, on the other hand, not so sure. I often joke about feminists being women who have had bad experiences with men, who end up isolating themselves away from men, only to imagine in their own little sewing circles what all those men that they aren't even actually talking to must be like. And then, of course, the feminists project all their own personal bullshit onto these men that exist as figments of their imagination, and generally assume the worst out of all men. But how are MGTOWs all that much different than this idea of feminists doing that to men? Don't MGTOWs kind of do that to women? Hashtag not all, but I personally don't assume the worst about women because I have several female friends, and while maybe there might be 1 or 2 gay guys out there who are only gay because they refuse to have relationships with women, I am simply not one of those guys. I simply am attracted to dudes. That's where it ends. Truthfully, a lot of my favorite men's rights speakers or feminist critics tend to be women. It's not just that I tend to relate to women and gay men maybe slightly more than straight men in general for whatever reason, but it's also because I can rest assured that if it's a woman speaking out about men's issues, it's almost unanimously going to be because they really see how unjust the world really is for men and boys currently. I don't assume that it's because the woman is milking the men's movement for personal gains, but a lot of people do make that assumption about those women. You see, for me, one of the biggest epiphanies I had in relation to getting into caring about the gender-specific issues of men and boys was finally realizing that straight guys have a lot of problems to deal with that I never even have to slightly worry about, coupled with the fact that basically nobody ever gives them any sympathy or empathy, because so many people, especially on the political left, think it is 100% acceptable to unapologetically treat straight guys like garbage. It took feminists viciously attacking the gay male community for me to finally see how ruthless they can be with the self-righteousness of ideological groupthink. But once I realized that hole in my empathy for humans, I was finally able to understand the anger and frustration that so many straight men go through when they look at ideologies like feminism that encourage people to always assume straight men to be the perpetrator in any domestic violence situation with a woman, or unanimously assumes them to be convicted rapists if any woman ever utters the accusation. I was able to realize that feminism itself was worth dismantling, finally, or at the very least, reforming until it basically doesn't resemble the current fourth wave intersectional model in any way. Even though the majority of ways in which feminists often victimize men are things that I basically have no chance of ever experiencing. However, what I find troubling about some MGTOWs is that it seems like they are taking out their hatred of feminists on all women, which is not what I ever intended when I began my personal mission of helping end the battle of the sexes that current feminism has initiated so viciously, especially over the past 5 years on the internet. To say it simply, fourth wave feminism is what happened when feminists waged war by way of blogs, social media, and Hillary Clinton's candidacy. But not all women deserve to suffer from their mistakes. I'll put it like this. I don't want to make any accusations, because for all I know, I'm completely wrong about this, but something interesting happened about a month ago. Although I am not subscribed to the guy, I saw that Sandman had a video about fourth wave feminism that was uploaded on February 4th, and since I have been one of the first feminist critics to really separate fourth wave feminism from third wave feminism, I decided to check it out. Now, his video has just shy of 20,000 views at this time, and my most recent stab at defining fourth wave feminism, which I uploaded in December, has just shy of 14,000 views, even though I have only a relatively small fraction of the subscriber base as Sandman does. So, although I have no idea if Sandman watched my video or not, I can rest assured that since my video on fourth wave feminism received almost twice as many views as I have subscribers and has over 500 thumbs up, it made at least a small ripple in the men's rights and feminist critic YouTube sphere, which likely carried over into MGTOW land and maybe into Sandman's consideration, at least by way of a game of internet telephone. But here's where it gets weird. There was at least one very clear commonality between the way I describe fourth wave feminism and the way Sandman described it, but he worded it rather differently. In my video, I talked about how third wave feminism during its peak in the 90s was not thought of as much of an internet-driven movement, as it was mostly a punk rock and liberal arts college type of thing, and they passed out photocopied zines at shows and events instead of relying much on the internet. My thesis was that I felt feminists just weren't really smart enough to use the internet effectively during the peak of the third wave. Keywords: feminists weren't usually smart enough. Sandman, however, decided to take it a step further and claim that women weren't able to effectively use the internet as an entire gender until the advent of smartphones, which made browsing the web easy for them for their inferior female minds. Paraphrasing. I have to admit, when I watched his video, I felt a tad bit dirty inside. Not only because I have to wonder if somehow my observation about feminists not really getting good at using the internet until late last decade made it into his argument without my knowledge or him crediting me, which I wouldn't really care about normally, but more so the idea that he was twisting it into a way to attack women as a whole when that was not my intent. To be truthful, I knew several females in the 90s who used the internet, and if they were self identified feminists, they certainly didn't act anything like the fourth wavers of today. They seemed well aware that internet and geek culture was mainly dominated by men, and they dealt with that fairly, similar to actual female gamers who aren't actual feminists. Feminists who seemingly only embark in the aforementioned activities so they can boss people around. More so, I have to wonder, are MGTOWs like Sandman making the same logical fallacy as feminists when they lump all feminists and women together in the same bracket, like all women are feminists? Obviously, every men's rights advocate or feminist critic has had to deal with numerous people who don't understand that we are not criticizing women as a whole when we are criticizing feminists. But does Sandman think that all women are feminists? I really don't know because I can't say I've had a lot of time to get into his videos, but it wouldn't surprise me. Look, MGTOWs, I'll say again that I don't have a problem with your life choices. And if you want to offer support to men who are deciding to live at least for a while without seeking romantic female companionship, that's absolutely fine with me. But to deny that there are MGTOWs who are out there who are taking it a step too far and turning MGTOW philosophies into a reactionary Frankenstein abomination monster of men's rights, pickup artists, and full-blown misogynistic weirdos, well, to say that that isn't true would be dishonest of me. And I can't endorse that because it's just not who I am. I actually like women, and I feel many of the best allies men's rights advocates can have might just be women, because these people are doing it not usually for themselves or because they are getting back at somebody who did them wrong, but because they feel it's the right thing to do. I'm not sure why some of you guys feel compelled to try to get me on your team. If it's simply because you think I'm a good speaker about the issues of men and boys or something, then I'm sincerely flattered and that's nice of you. But really, I'm fine as it is with my stance as simply advocating for the issues of men and boys on my channel. And for the radical MGTOWs that I was mentioning before, I really wish you'd stop doing things that make the MRM look bad. Okay, I have heard that if I make this type of video, I'll get a bunch of flack, and I welcome it. Bring it on in the comments and stay tuned.